Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our Strategically Increasing Your Agency's Presence webinar. I'm Peggy Gleason, Administrative Project Assistant for Community Action Partnership of Oregon. Most of you are familiar with our presenter, Ken Ackerman. Ken is the creator and manager of virtualcap.org, which was launched in 2002, and it's a great resource for community action agencies around the nation. Ken has been involved in community action since 1971 and served as executive director of an agency in Virginia for almost 25 years. He's a certified peer reviewer for the Award for Excellent Pathways to Excellence in Community Action and has provided interim management assistance and direct TNTA to community action agencies across the U.S. For those of you who aren't familiar with the GoToWebinar format, I'd like to go over a few things before we start. First of all, we have you all muted to avoid feedback problems. For your audio, you have the choice of using the telephone call-in number or your computer microphone and speakers. When using your computer, a USB headset is recommended. You can switch between the telephone and the computer audio at any time during the webinar. If you're having trouble hearing or viewing the presentation or you want to ask a question, you can do that by typing a message in the question area at the bottom of the control panel and then clicking on Send Message to Staff and then clicking Send. I'll respond to any questions that I'm able to during the presentation, and Ken will pause occasionally to answer questions specifically for him. Ken will also allow time for questions at the end of the webinar, so if you prefer to ask one, just click on Raise Hand button at the Grab tab at the top left of your control panel, and I'll unmute you. There will be a copy of the full presentation with live links sent out to all of you attendees by email after the completion of the webinar. We ask that you take a few minutes to fill out the short survey at the end of the webinar because your feedback is very important to us in planning future webinars. Capo's pleased to offer Ken's webinar, and I'll go ahead and hand over the controls to him and hope you all enjoy the presentation.
Great. Thank you very much, Peggy, and good morning to all of you. You've heard a little bit about who I am. I'd like to ask you through this quick poll to please give me some information on what your role is in your agency. So you should be seeing the poll as we speak, and I'd appreciate your introducing yourself in this really simple way. Okay, great. I'll give you about 5 more seconds. And we can now close it out. So let's take a look at the results here. So as I expected, we have a good mix of people working in different capacities in each agency, and you can see the results, I believe, on your screen. Senior and program managers represent about 2/3 of the total, planners about 1/5, some executive directors, CEOs, and some direct service staff. So that's really helpful. I appreciate that. I want to go back to the title slide here and emphasize that the purpose of this webinar is to introduce you to some concepts that I feel are really key to helping you broaden your agency's presence in your areas. I also want to point out, however, that I put together this material to serve as a resource guide, which you see emphasized on the cover slide here. And by that, when you get the PDF of the presentation as an email attachment, if you open it up in your computer, you'll have quite a number of resources that I'll be sharing with you that you can directly access. So I hope you'll take advantage of this as a resource guide, and also that you'll share it with others in your agency, because truly this is not a one-person task, and we'll be getting into that a little bit through the webinar. Okay, one more poll I'd like to put out here is how your agency is currently looking at itself in terms of how well you're known and how strong your presence is in your community. We are not going to disclose anybody's answers here. We'd just like to see aggregately how those of you on the webinar today feel your agency is moving ahead to really broaden awareness of who you are and what you do and what you achieve. And I appreciate your participation in this poll as well. Okay, I'll take about maybe 5 more seconds. Great, we have about just over 80%, so almost 90 now. Going, closed. Great, okay. And I'll share this with you. Actually, I just realized I didn't click the share on the last poll, but I did give you the general results. So in this one, your being on the webinar today hopefully will give you some additional ideas and resources to help you expand what you're doing. 6% excellent, about just over half saying pretty good, and then the rest fair and not so good, so about 40% there. So again, a good mix. I do hope that each one of you, regardless of where you are on the spectrum, will find great tools, great information as we move along. So this is really the theme that I want to put out there, and that is for your agency and for community action across the country to stop being what's often called the world's best kept secret, and I truly believe that. My agency did a lot in terms of trying to put together effective communications and public awareness. We were known quite well by many people in segments of our community, but still invariably when you would meet someone and they asked what you would do, what you do and who you work for, they had no clue what our agency was. So it's a never-ending effort to keep working on this and to truly stop being the world's best kept secret. So I'm going to actually divide this presentation up into 4 main components. The first one has to do with forging a strong internal identity for your agency. Following that, we'll be talking about deliberately creating public awareness, reinforcing the value you create in your community, increasing your influence, and then closing out with 2 tools that I hope will help you. One, helping you look at a way to organize your efforts in this area, and secondly, how all of this relates to the CSBG organizational standards. I'm sure you've seen images like this with a number of triangles all blended together, giving you the challenge then to count how many triangles do you see. And of course this one is quite complicated. I'll give you about 5 seconds, start counting them. I'm sure that's totally impossible, but I think you get the idea. And to me, this really reflects in many ways the challenges that community action agencies have to really be known in a strong way within the communities being served. Oftentimes, people may have heard of the agency. They've heard of your acronym or your name, which would be the big triangle. Maybe they know generally what you're doing to improve the community, to fight poverty, or however it's framed. Or they might know one of your programs. Oh, I've heard of Head Start, or I've heard of fuel assistance. I didn't know you did all of this other types of work. So to me, again, that is very much representative of the challenge that we have, and it's up to us now to be better known than just a bunch of triangles or maybe one big one. So taking a look at this slide here, my next poll for you has to do with how many community action agencies you see on this slide. I'll give you a few, about maybe 20 seconds to look at it and to think about it. So count how many different community action agencies you're looking at. Okay, and here I'm going to launch the poll and I give you 4 choices. Okay, have about 2/3 have responded. I'll give you a few more seconds. Don't want to take too much time on the poll. And ready, I'm about to close it out. Going, gone. Okay, let's take a look at the results here. So we had, really it was split. Some people counted all of the images and came up with 11, and others basically said 1. A few said, well, one person I believe said 3. So let's take a look at these again. And I believe you see the images, and there's your answer. There's 1. If you notice, Community Action Duluth, which is based in Minnesota, basically came up with a uniform way for all of their programs to portray themselves through their logos. I remember at one point in my agency we had separate logos for the Head Start letterhead and separate logos for the main agency letterhead, which is not really a good approach to take. So Community Action Duluth, again, has put together a design. I'm not sure why they have all the different colors, but at least the layout is pretty much consistent. And that's really, again, what we're trying to do here to be better known in the community, not just have consistent images, but to have people understand more cohesively what we're doing. So going into the first part of the presentation today, forging a strong internal identity, what I want to do is give you one more poll. I only have two more during this session, basically to ask you why you feel it's important for your agency to be well known and respected in the community. And in this one, I believe you can choose one or more. You can choose all four if you like, or however many you feel are relevant. So you see the poll there. Okay, we'll take a few more seconds here. About 2/3 have responded. Great. Okay, let's close the poll out with about 80%, and I'll share with you. So having the ability to choose one or more, a lot of you did choose three of them, and you can see what the responses are. So as we move through the presentation, think of these reasons that we've offered to you, and look at the different strategies that I'll be outlining, thinking how this will help people understand what we offer in case they need our assistance, how our causes and our overall cause is important to donate to us, and how they may want to get involved with us in various ways as well. So back to the cover slide for this section, you'll see the 4 sections. This is the first one. I'll be opening each section with a main slide here showing you the components within that section. In this one, we have 7 different components. The first one has to do the brand for your agency. Under that, you see some aspects of that I've listed. The ones that have an asterisk next to them are the ones that I offer some useful resources on the following slides. So under brand, certainly your agency name. Many have community action in them, others don't. Your name is still part of your brand for your agency. Likewise, the tagline. Not all agencies have taglines. I'll share some with you, but it's something you might consider developing if you don't have one. Logos, similarly, and finally an elevator speech. The vision for your agency, an inspirational statement. I put this, such as Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech about reaching the mountaintop. It really has an emotional grab to it, and you can actually see what your vision is. Mission, the beacon and glue for your agency. It should be a concise statement, a powerful statement that resonates about why you exist. I'll be giving you some tools to assess and consider looking again at your mission statement, something that should be done periodically, in my opinion. What you're working to accomplish, the difference you make. Your agency values, again, some agencies formally articulate these, others don't necessarily. I think it's a good idea to have them. So something to think about, how you put together values that your agency believes in and what you stand for and how you approach your work. The board providing leadership as part of your agency's identity. You'll see the typical types of pieces that I put in here. Having a high-performing board is certainly key. Having a diverse and influential membership. Promoting the agency, being respected in all sectors of the community. Certainly your employees as stakeholders. Committed to your mission, understanding their role, exemplifying professional conduct, accountable, and striving for high-level performance. And finally, the material that you have that you use for agency locations and events. How does it unify your agency? And you can see the different pieces of that I included in this as examples in terms of signs, banners, displaying your mission statement on your publications, your flyers, infographics, and promotional items. As we go through this, so here's the beginning slide of this first section. I will be giving you a checklist at the end that will have each of these pieces to it that you can look at either to check off the ones that you think you're doing well on, or perhaps to rate overall how you're doing, to begin picking out some priorities on areas that you feel would be useful to work with to strengthen your work in terms of becoming better known in your community. Okay, branding. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I hope, though, that you're all familiar with the Community Action Partnership, our national association based in Washington, D.C., and the effort that's been going on related to branding throughout the country. They have a part of their website talking about branding. The link's over there in the upper right. They provide some style guidelines. Within that, you can see these are all live links. So if when you get the PDF, you can click on that link and you'll have a copy of the guidelines, or you'll go right on the top one to the website. And certainly the promise of community action is a big piece of the branding for our network. A key part of this really is whether your agency has any reference at all to the phrase community action in your name or elsewhere. And I know in Oregon especially, maybe half the agencies do have community action and maybe half or a little under half don't have it. That doesn't mean it's good or bad, but if you feel as a network in Oregon and certainly in the other states as well that having some common identity, a consideration would be how you achieve that, and is using community action, perhaps not changing your name, but at least in some other ways to identify you with the overall network. And a part of that, of course, is like United Way. Many agencies get United Way funding. It's not part of their name, but they do identify as part of the United Way network. More on branding, I'm going to be sharing with you items from Virtual CAP Roundup, our monthly publication, which each Oregon agency is getting through CAPO. We're still very interested in getting other subscribers, but you'll be able to open up this article here on branding that will give you some more information on that, including a speaker at the Branding Summit from Community Action in Chicago. You'll get some information there. Here are some community action taglines. The one at the top I put there particularly, although it's alphabetical, because that's an agency that does not have community action in their name. So in their tagline, they use the phrase community action. That's just one strategy to help create that awareness that you're part of a larger network. So if you don't have a tagline or you want to revisit yours, here's some examples. Here's some resources that you can use to develop taglines for your agency. The top ones are specifically the top 4 about taglines. The bottom 4 are a little bit different. They're showing ways to involve your board staff and the community overall in looking at your taglines, creating elevator speech, and so on and so forth. In fact, the agency that changed its name is now called Blueprint. It's in Pennsylvania, Blueprints, and they are featured in that first article under involving board staff and the community from the Nonprofit Quarterly. So that's one in particular that I'd suggest you take a look at. The other 2 have to do with developing an elevator speech, and the last one, using the medium of haiku poetry to craft a mission statement. I know some of you probably are very familiar with haiku, perhaps others not. They're 3-line poems with 17 syllables, 5 syllables first line, 7 in the second, and 5 in the third. So here's an example that I put together of a haiku that might be used to help craft a mission statement or an elevator speech. And getting your staff and board involved in an exercise, breaking up into small groups and coming up with haikus about your agency, it's a great thing to do. We did this with some strategic planning for agencies. You can see creating pathways, doors of opportunity, working together. Very simple. It's in a haiku form. You might break it out into a full mission statement if this works for you. I don't mean the wording, but the exercise. As far as mission statements and vision statements, here are 2 great resources. One from a website, topnonprofits.com. Each of these, the one on the left is a worksheet. The other one gives you some bullets to consider as you develop and modify your mission statements. And by the way, as we go through this, if you have examples of the type of strategies that your agency has taken, please put them in the chat area. We'd love to see them. As we have time later, we'll go back and share some, and certainly we'll send them out after the session. Employees and stakeholders, in our June issue of Virtual CAP Roundup, we had an article on building employee job satisfaction. There are some tools here, which I'll show you. I'll open that up for you. That are one of those links. So there you have a bunch of resources that were in Virtual CAP Roundup. You can open it up through the slide we just shared with you, and you can take a look at any of these employment engagement surveys, some examples from community action agencies at the bottom of that section, as well as some other resources that you might find to be useful. Hopefully you will. Okay, getting back to the slide. The control panel is a little bit clunky here. Give me 1 second, please. Okay, great. So there you have employee as stakeholders. And you can see some of the topics covered at the bottom of the slide. In our May issue, we had an effort by a community action agency in Ohio where the senior managers, and in this case it was the CEO as well as a program level director, did some very short videos that they have available to all of their employees, since they have a spread out operation and quite a few employees, so it's hard for them to get everyone together at one time. And so these videos are really great. I hope you'll take a look at this article from Roundup, and you can actually access the videos where the CEO is talking about the agency's mission and values, the program director talking about the area of work that they're doing under early childhood development. And altogether, as it notes on the slide, this helps advance the agency's mission and values. Here's an agency in Kansas that has put together a series of videos featuring their board and staff members. They call them Community Action Poverty Fighters. This was in our May issue of Roundup. Opening up the link up top there, it says Open Article, which I just see that link has been taken off, so I'll add it before the slides go out. It's actually on the image. There's still the link, but I'll get it in that text box as well. They did this during Community Action Month. However, they plan on continuing to develop these videos throughout the year. Certainly, it's a concept that you can use either with Community Action Month, a good time to promote the agency overall, as well as during the course of the year additionally. Second area that I'm going into now is deliberately creating public awareness. And in this one, I have 7 items again as the first. The first one is a strategic communications plan. That is a formally developed plan that helps you consider what your goals are, how you're going to carry it out, what your time frame is, who's going to be responsible, a typical kind of strategic plan, but this one on strategies related to communications. Here's where we have our last poll, and that very simply is, does your agency have a strategic communication plan, a formal strategic communication plan? So let me launch the poll. Okay. Okay, great. About 3/4 have responded. To give you a few more seconds here, whether or not your agency has a strategic communications plan. And getting ready to close out. Okay, here we go, going. One more vote, give you a chance. Okay, let's close it out, and I'll share the results with you. So really only about 20% know for sure that they do, half say they don't, and the other third aren't sure. So hopefully this is something that will be useful to you. Going back to that slide, you notice a link underneath the bottom of this particular section. The Iowa Community Action Association has gathered a bunch of free resources for the most part that you could use in designing a lot of the materials that you might want to use. Certainly having a dynamic website, in my opinion, is essential. We'll get into that. I'll leave that for now. An annual report, not all agencies have them. Whether you think that's useful or not, that's up to you. But if you do have one, there's some materials here and ideas here that I'd like to share with you, particularly in terms of looking at having a report show what you've accomplished. High-level data, success stories, quotes, and so on, photos, highlighting material. And you'll see I'm really emphasizing here keeping these efforts to be as very clean and readable as possible. I see many annual reports across the country. Some of them are very difficult to read and truthfully don't seem to draw you in feeling that it's worthy of your time. I'm not saying all, but there are some, so it's evaluating what you do and making sure that you're not in that category. So obviously having newsletters if you do, and email blasts is another way, using social media, using the mainstream media, and finally having community events. Again, these are the 7 sections. There's some bullets or small phrases under them that I think would be good guides to use as you think about this work. So we have 2 resources for you helping put together a formal strategic communications plan. The first one here is from Upleaf Technology Solutions. You notice the topics they cover. This is really mapping out an annual plan, a coordinated annual plan with particular activities under different goals and what it is you want to get out to the target audiences that you use, how you're going to communicate it, what your messages are going to be, when you're going to do that, how will you determine if you're successful or not, and then a specific calendar of activities. Likewise, NPower provides another toolkit related to communications planning. They provide some worksheets, and that in particular I gave you a separate link at the bottom there to those worksheets. I think they would be great assets in terms of putting these ideas together. I like their outline. Of course, they talk about doing a little bit of preliminary thinking about the direction you want to go in, and then specifically looking at the who, what, how you're going to do that, who you want to influence, what your message is, what you want to see. There's one piece on here I put under what you want to say, the Start With Why video. I found that from Merritt Mount, who was one of the presenters of the Washington State Community Action Partnership. He was presenting in Philadelphia at the Partnership's National Convention on the Futures Project, which I know Oregon and Washington are 2 of the states involved, as well as I believe Idaho. And so you can get more information, but that video in particular, the Start With Why video, is excellent. And then test whatever you do. I don't think you should put something out that's untested. How you're going to reach your audiences, and then looking at what some of the best practices are in doing that work. I talked about websites. If you go to virtualcap.org, the link at the bottom of the slide there will take you right to our directory of the websites, and actually a listing, even agencies that don't have websites, of community action agencies across the country. On a website, I strongly feel that the home page should not be dense. Really, none of the pages I would suggest making them too dense, busy, or wordy. The site overall, not too difficult to navigate, and using multimedia to approach reaching people in effective ways. Here's a visual, it's an infographic on how people see things visually and pick up on that information much more than they do on body copy. That gets back to my whole encouragement to make sure you keep whatever you're doing looking clean, not too dense, busy, or wordy, etc. And if you notice on the upper left corner there, 90% of information transmitted to the brain is visual. Upper middle, caption text gets read 4 times more than body copy. And you could look at all of these along the way. It just, again, reinforces the idea that densely worded, long pieces of information to read really isn't going to get through as well as something that gets somebody really quickly. Then give them the other material to read. I'm not saying don't do that, but I think you want to get people to buy into who you are and what you're about as easily as possible. Here's an article from Blackbaud about developing an effective nonprofit website. They provide 10 steps to do that. One piece that I highlight here is keeping the content fresh. Many times I'll go on a website looking for information, and I either find that if there's been a new program recently, you click on that program and the page comes up, content still under development, and this is long after that program started. On the other hand, I'll look for annual reports on an agency website, and here we are in 2017, and the latest annual report I'll see is 2011. So I'm not saying they should have done one every year after that, but truthfully, seeing a 2011 annual report to me leaves a lot to be desired. I'd almost rather not have that on there, truthfully. At the bottom, there's some additional resources giving you some examples of best websites and so on. You know, going back to the directory that I had in the first slide of the website piece here, one idea is to have several of your staff member split up and look at some websites and try to see ones that they think are really appealing. So again, this is not a one-person job, but you might want to take advantage of having access to what other agencies have put together. So here are some ideas for content on your website. It's not a be-all and end-all, but it's a piece that you can look at. Again, measure, do you have these? Do you have comparable items? Do you have others that you think would be useful for you? It's a starting point. And likewise on the right there, some formats that you can use, particularly embedding videos. In fact, you noticed I shared a few videos with you already, both from the Community Action Poverty Fighters. There are others on here I believe that we'll have that you may want to have directly on your website. We're going to start featuring, in fact, in the September issue of Virtual CAP Roundup, we're going to have the Community Action Agency video or videos of the month, and we have a couple coming out this month. So take a look at the videos and consider developing them. It's not that difficult anymore to do that. And if you look through, let me go back there, I'm really sorry. I do believe I have some other material coming up for you, a little bit on creating videos. Here's Community Action Annual Reports. Again, on Virtual CAP, we have listings of annual reports. The latest year we've put out so far is 2016. If yours isn't on here, please send it. We'll get it listed and included. But likewise, you may want to browse through these, have staff look at what agencies have put out, and consider, you know, how is yours compared to others? Are there ways that you could use some of the materials or formats, I should say, to enhance your annual report, or if you don't have one, maybe to develop one. Just as a website over in the upper right, I encourage having these being concise and compelling to resonate about why you're important, and I repeated the piece underneath that about how visual information gets across a lot stronger oftentimes than written copy. In the June issue of Virtual CAP Roundup, our cover story was Community Action Agency Annual Reports. And in that, the page over on the right there has a number of resources. You'll be able to download this again when you have the slides. It includes helping you develop infographics, suggestions on what you should include in a report, including how your results are presented, and so on. Also, there are a handful of examples of Community Action Agency reports in this article. Up at the top, you can see 5 of them. So you'll have access to those. You'll be able to open those agencies, submit your agencies. At the very bottom, though, we pulled out some formats that some agencies have used that you might find to be worth looking at to give you some ideas on what you might want to add to your report in the future.
Ken, could I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
We had a question about the links. She asked, how do we use all these links if the slides are sent to us in PDF form?
There'll be live links within the PDF.
And I just want to let everyone know, for some reason, I'm not able to answer the questions in chat. So I do have someone else that lost her audio. And I just want to suggest that if you're using, Laura, if you're using your computer for audio, maybe switch to the telephone number, and vice versa. If you're using your telephone, switch to the computer audio. And if you still can't hear us, then just want to let you know we will have a recording available.
Very good. Okay.
And also a link to GoToWebinar where the recording will be available.
Great. Okay. Thank you for handling that. Okay, so I've actually am finished with that slide, and we'll go on to social media. And the couple of pieces on this one. The first few links at the top. The first one, in fact, is an upcoming webinar that the North Carolina Community Action Association is conducting in November. So you can click on that link there and learn about it. And if you'd like to register, go on in. There's a nominal cost for that, but I want to disclose that I am not a hands-on expert with everything that is social media. So I offer you these resources, but I also encourage you, if you'd like to dig deeper into it, to consider going into the webinar presentation that North Carolina is offering. Now, having said that, the rest of the links on this particular slide basically offer an overview of social media for nonprofit use. What I think is really important that the third and fourth links have are developing a policy for your agency. It probably should have done another poll to see how many agencies that are involved in the webinar today actually have written social media policies. So if that's something that you don't have, I really, again, strongly encourage that you put that in place. There is a template you can use through the Community Action Partnerships Risk Management Portal. If you're a member of the partnership, you can go on to that. The link is there. There's a very quick and easy registration process, and then you could use that to fill in the blanks and create your own social media policy. Under that, there's also some workbook and some templates that you could use as well. The last 5 links there talk about using social media and in successful ways for your agency, so I'll just leave that with you. Using the mainstream media, again, having a media policy, I think, is important as well. So on this one, I give you, again, from the Community Action Risk Management Portal, the Public Relations Media Inquiries Policy Template. Encourage you to take a look at that. Board Source also offers a sample media relations policy. And then the third one there is creating a media kit. So you would have resources that are readily available for anyone in the media and actually anyone in the public as well to access material information about your program. Make it really simple for them. So there's a great guide on how to do that. Following that, we have some tips and tools on working with the media. The Marguerite Casey Foundation has a great toolbox there that I encourage you to look at as well. So that is the second section, and we'll move on now to the third section on reinforcing the value you create. I have 3 items under this section. The first one is tying your mission and values to the results that you're accomplishing. The whys of what you do, the why, okay? Now, unfortunately, I wasn't able to show the video that I referenced a while back that came out of the Futures Project presentation. But really, look at that video and think about the whys of what you do, not what you do so much in how many of this or how many of that, but really, what is your purpose? What is it that you're about? We believe that families in our community should have a decent, affordable place to live. And in doing that, we create 100 units of affordable rental housing. So it's not so much just saying we create the rental housing, it's prefacing that with what you believe in. That really draws people more out. It's more heartfelt than just giving cold data. So I give you that as a real quick example. I'm not dwelling much on the data part of it because there's a lot going on in our network, of course, about data and about showing your results. So I encourage you to get with the people in your agency who are heavily involved in that, showing not only the data on your services, the outcomes of your work, but ultimately the value to the community. And I give some examples of how that could be done through annual reports, social media, etc. Infographics I'll go into a little bit, videos, public reports to your local governing officials, press coverage, and possibly a speakers bureau. Again, here's what I was trying to get at the beginning of this slide, making it personal, really getting people to have a strong, warm, fuzzy feeling and really dedicated feeling to the importance of the work that community action is all about and the importance of the achievements that you've managed to contribute to the community. So you'll see a couple of things here. And finally, getting people directly involved with you, getting out in the community, of course, that's part of what Community Action Foundation is all about, through tours, testimonials from people you work with, from others in the community who can speak to your work. Saw a great video a few years ago by a Community Action Agency in Pennsylvania that had one script that was showing different people from different sectors of the community saying a couple of words in that script. So it just ran continuously with all these different people who had some level of recognition, some high level of recognition, whether it were elected officials, educators, community residents, people who receive services. And it was really a great, great video. So that was just talking heads, but it was a little bit different. Generally, if you have a long video where when you just go staff talking about this or that, I don't think it's as compelling as having it blended with other images and with other people contributing to testifying for your agency. That's kind of a quick getting on a soapbox from my standpoint. Using customer satisfaction data as part of your testimonials, hopefully it's good. And if it's not, what are you doing to improve it? And then engaging your customers as advocates. This quote really captures what I'm trying to articulate by Maya Angelou. I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So that last phrase there, again, is what I'm trying to emphasize. So here's some resources on infographics, including some examples from Community Action Agency infographics that you might find useful. And go on to the next one here. Whoops, sorry. The last area here is increasing your influence. I believe this is important to strategically increasing your agency's presence, because your influence gives you a stronger level of respect in your community and certainly an influence over the issues that we're trying to change for the people and the communities that we serve. So the first thing, which is far from foreign to community action, but the word strategic, emphasizing strategic, to me is the key to this. Every community action agency has partnerships. I hope that it's very heavily strategically put in place. And what I mean by that is there are some key partners and allies that I think really need to be cultivated and worked on a high level. It doesn't just include people that you have programmatic partnerships with, but people and groups in particular who you feel can help you achieve the mission of your agency, the overall work that you're heading toward, and really just a few key ones. It doesn't have to be 300. So what's the focus of your strategic effort? What's your action plan, and so on? A power analysis may be something that you're familiar with. I'm going to offer some tools about that, looking at what connections you have in the community with the people who have influence in the community, and by that, what type of ability you have to gain the type of support you need for the agency and the issues you're dealing with. So a power analysis. Certainly your board, earlier on I mentioned, and it's something that's promoted on many levels, having a diverse board, connected with and able to influence important sectors of the community. And it's important to think broadly who those important sectors are. And that the board also both understands and acts upon its role as an advocate for the agency and for the agency's mission. And then developing other forms of involvement to increase your influence, such as advisory groups you may have, friends groups that you might develop, volunteers involved with your agency, having others involved in your agency as on committees or ad hoc groups that you set up, and organizing events within the community. And you could see a few of them listed there. Developing coalitions to work on particular issues, hosting brown bag lunches, and sponsoring public forums are some of those. On strategic partnerships, I offer you two resources. One is put together by the Bridgespan Group, a toolkit on partnerships and collaboration. They also put in collective impact, which actually I've done a webinar for Oregon before. I'd be happy to send you the slides for that if you'd be interested. On virtualcap.org, we have a partnership tracking tool that was put together by Community Action Inc. in Kansas. And that is really it's a spreadsheet, and it's a good way to begin to distinguish between your key partnerships and your other types of partnerships that are more coordinating efforts within your programs. So I'd encourage you looking at that description we have and downloading the Excel spreadsheet and putting that to work for your agency. Power mapping really has to do with identifying the key figures and groups in your community that have influence over so much of what affects the lives of the people that we serve. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with 6 degrees of separation. That is a theory basically that in some form or fashion everyone is connected with people only 6 degrees removed, which really only is not a small amount. But if we were in a workshop right now, we could do a great exercise of this, and there's some resources there under power mapping that'll help you work through some exercises with your staff and board to see who do you feel are the key influencers in your community, both individual and organizational, and are we connected, or how can we get connected to these groups? So open up the power mapping resources and see where that takes you. And finally, board recruitment and board advocacy. Obviously, this is not a governance workshop or webinar, but we do put down some resources here to help you look at your board composition, to help determine some key types of organizations, individuals with certain skills and talents, representing different sectors of the community that you might look at as part of your board recruitment efforts, and also the board's role in advocacy. Very important in my opinion. So those are the 4 topic areas that I wanted to cover with all the various elements to them. I have 2 final pieces, and then we can certainly open up to hearing from you and both questions and comments you'd like to make about what your agency is involved with. First of all, in organizing your efforts. So as I mentioned, the 21 topics that I went over very quickly today, we have a checklist right there that you can see that you could print off and then use for your agency. As I mentioned earlier, you might want to rate how you think your agency is doing under these 21 areas. That doesn't mean the one that you rate the lowest needs the most attention, but it just gives you an idea of where you stand on all of those. You might want to begin to have some conversations within your agency in some fashion, but use this as a guide. I think that would be useful as a starting point. Back to the slide here. So use the slides as a toolkit. Again, share them with the people in your agency who might put this work to use, or might be officially working on it with others. And I have 6 bullets down here on ways to tackle this, because truthfully it's a lot. That's no secret, I'm sure. So one way, of course, is do you or can you get a dedicated staff position to coordinate and carry out some of this work? That link there is actually a job description for a communications specialist or coordinator from a community action agency. Along with that, you might develop a staff committee or a board committee as well to oversee this work. Perhaps it would fit in with one of the standing board committees. Determine if any staff members might be interested in some facets of this. For example, social media. I'm sure there are many staff members who know a lot about social media. Maybe a small work group could be put together on different parts of this. Okay, getting volunteers. I know the agency at the top with the dedicated staff position, I was able to get the marketing director from the local utility company to help put together a framework for the agency's new communication strategic plan, and that was pro bono. So take a look around at the resources you might be able to draw upon, whether it's retired people, business corporate support who would lend someone to you to do that, interns from universities and others. And finally, speak to other agencies, find out how they're handling this work. So those are some examples for you. And finally, the last thing that I put together here are some matrices on how each of these areas connect with the CSBG organizational standards. There are 3 of these sheets. These happen to be categories 1 through 4. So on that then, at the top, we have which standard it is under each category, and then have checked off under the webinar topics where they fit within those categories. So if you feel it's useful to connect them specifically to a category, you might find others that you'd like to add to this, but it's a good layout for you, I think. So that's by and large our webinar for today. I have some closing slides, but if people have comments, questions, suggestions on the work you're doing, please raise your hand or add a question. As I mentioned a few times, we've showcased Virtual CAP Roundup. Oregon has a statewide subscription. For those agencies in other states, you're certainly welcome, and I encourage you to subscribe. We're giving a discount through the end of September. If you're interested, email me and I'll get that to you. We also certainly would like to have statewide subscriptions in areas where we don't have them as well. Here's virtualcap.org. It's a 2-page flyer, front and back. You can see the range of information available on the website, both in terms of the internal operations of the agency, program areas, and national tools and resources. And finally, here's how to keep up with us. My email and phone numbers at the bottom. No problem, call me, email me. I'm happy to hear from you and give you support any way that might be helpful. So that's it. Peggy, I have not looked at questions and comments. Do you have anything?
Actually, I don't have any questions right now and no hand raised. So I just want to let everyone know, if you think of something later, don't hesitate to get a hold of Ken or I. And Ken, I want to thank you for the presentation. It was really great. You shared a wealth of information, and I'm sure many of the attendees will find this information useful. We are going to be sending out a copy of the full presentation, and it will have live links, as we mentioned before. And there will also be a copy of the recording that we'll send a link to, so you can view the webinar again. And eventually we will have that on our website also.
Great. Okay, and one thing we also need to mention, if I'm not mistaken, a feedback survey will go out at the close of the webinar, and I think you mentioned that at the very beginning, Peggy, so I'll just re-mention that. Right. Definitely would appreciate people giving us their feedback as part of that, so thank you.
Yeah, it should pop up as soon as they sign off.
Great, okay.
And if there's no further questions, I hope you all enjoyed the webinar, and you have a great day.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.